This is not news, coral scientists have been saying for literal decades, climate change is gonna destroy the reef. Hello everyone, I'm Lucy, or Dr. Lucy, and I'm a coral biologist. I guess the coral reef itself, it's just like an underwater rainforest. It's so biodiverse and it's just so beautiful. Every time I dive, even now, I just feel this sense of euphoria. We've got a multitude of stresses on corals, so it's not just temperature stress that corals are actually having to deal with. It's a multitude of factors, and it actually differs depending on the location. So for example, in the Caribbean, you've got stony coral tissue loss disease, and that is ripping through the Caribbean, and that is a bacterial and a virus disease that basically makes the coral lose its tissue and die. So it creates these big lesions, and that is transferred via boats as well. So the boats use ballast water, so they take water from one area and disperse it in another. And this is actually transferring the disease all across the Caribbean. And then in the Indo-Pacific, we have crown of thorns starfish outbreaks. So these crown of thorns, and these outbreaks are natural, they're not invasive. Crown of thorn outbreaks have been occurring there for as long as we know. However, these starfish are eating all the coral, and they're contributing up to like 40% coral cover loss. Increase in the severity and frequency of cyclones. We've got increased ocean temperatures. We've got the ocean becoming more acidic as it absorbs more carbon. We've got nutrient pollution from agriculture. I guess the problem is, we've got all these stresses, and they're happening with climate change, they're happening more frequently and close together, that the reefs don't have enough time to actually recover from these specific disturbances. What you see is irreversible change, so the ecosystem is never going to look or act or function the same as before the tipping point. Arguably never going to recover to what we would view as the healthy version of that ecosystem. And yet irreversible damage, so in coral reefs this is widespread die-off of species and certain individuals in certain areas. So thermotolerance is basically how hot can the coral itself be able to cope with in ocean temperatures. So that means it reaches a certain threshold, and some corals will die after that threshold, and it's different for every coral and symbiont association. So corals are in a symbiosis with photosynthetic algae, and this algae basically provides the coral with the nutrients and energy that it needs to be able to survive because corals are always in nutrient poor waters, and they can't support their own metabolism, growth, respiration, reproduction, or the algae also helps them kind of build their skeleton. This coral skeleton that creates the 3D structure on the reef. So without that algae, the corals can't do this, and that is when a coral bleaches. So it loses this algae that actually helps it get the energy it needs to survive in this environment. So the coral will only have a small amount of finite time to find a new algal partner in the environment to be able to live with and survive. But whether, not every coral is compatible with every algal symbiont. So it's a very, very complex relationship. Coral reefs, it depends what you read, like what statistic, because there's many, but provides like $9 trillion worth of services to the planet. So in that you've got tourism, the Great Barrier Reef brings in billions in tourism to Australia. So many people go there just to go to the reef. You've also got you know, the corals, basically the reef being an ecosystem where it supports lots of fish, so you've got a lot of fisheries, so that it's nursery grounds for a lot of species, because the coral provides this like kind of cryptic habitat where the small juveniles can basically hide from the bigger predators. So that's why we need the complex 3D structure of the reef. And also the medicinal kind of, you know, we get so many natural pharmaceuticals and medicinal products from the reefs. So it provides, like for example, zinconotide is a pain drug from cone snail venom. Cone snails are found around coral reefs, and this is basically a equivalent of morphine, but not addictive. And this is, you know, a marketed pharmaceutical bringing in lots of money. So, you know, there's a lot of future medicines that we can get from marine organisms because of the amount of molecules that they produce, which is great for new drug discovery as well. So they just provide so many services that, you know, we could lose forever. Got a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of amazing work being done all over the world by coral restoration workers and experts, and also scientists as well, to try and make, you know, bioengineer corals to make them kind of more firmly tolerant. So looking at their genetics and going in after a bleaching event, seeing which individuals have actually survived, and kind of look at the genetics of these individuals to understand, you know, can we actually transfer this thermotolerance to their offspring, you know? So I think scientists are trying to, you know, kind of extract some species that are looking like they're gonna not be able to survive, and keeping them in labs until at, you know, a certain temperature, so until we know, or we have solutions to be able to outplant them back onto the reefs. But yeah, I think it depends who you talk to about where we think reefs are going, but it might be a case that we either, if we don't change the carbon emissions, that, you know, we lose a lot of reefs altogether. Or it could be a sense where we have reefs or we have corals, but it doesn't really look like a reef, or if it does, it's more a monoculture. So it's like, you can associate this similar to palm oil plantations in rainforests, you know. We only have 1 or 2 species dominating the reef, and that is a problem, because as soon as you lose that diversity, you lose the functions that the ecosystem can provide. So, and it'll have knock-on effects on the kind of levels of animals and trophic levels above it. So it'll affect everything from small fish that live in the coral to, you know, predators that come to the reef, like you know, sharks, to feed on certain fish species, because if the fish below them die out, then the sharks are going to have less prey to eat. And also, if the carbon emissions keep going at the rates that they're going and the planet keeps heating up, the corals that scientists and the restoration workers might be like, oh, this coral's firmly tolerant, right? It might not be firmly tolerant in 2 years if we're still pushing, making the planet warmer and warmer. So we're kind of up against this like timeline where we don't have enough time to get the results we need, because we're actually warming the planet way faster than what we can work on. And also these avenues are absolutely amazing, but it's kind of deploying them to the scale that we actually need them to save the reefs, because they're so, you know, labour and time intensive. And we're talking about, by 2050, we're talking about potentially 90% of corals being lost. That's 90% in 25 years. So this is how, like, and coral scientists have, this is not news, you know, coral scientists have been saying for literal decades, you know, climate change is gonna destroy the reefs. The stuff that gives me hope is that we can still do stuff, like we can still go out there and act. Like, you know, if you can either do nothing or you can do something. We've got some awesome technologies coming out now where we're trying to get like high throughput coral larvae to reefs without, you know, we can do it via robotics. So There's a lot of innovations that are coming out that are super exciting.